It's World Geekly News.
Welcome friends to World Geekly News and my look at 10 of my favourite non-fiction horror books. I'm Paul, I'll be your host for the next few minutes and let's just jump straight in. No particular order, what I've got first, it's not really horror although it does have elements of it. This is called Treasury of British Folklore. Maypoles, Mandrakes and Mistletoe. This is by D.G. Chainey, who's one of the people that runs the Folklore Thursday Twitter feed, which if you ever get the chance, go and visit it, it's really great. Every Thursday, if you follow the hashtag Folklore Thursday, you'll get ghost stories, horror stories, lots of folklore, loads of people interacting. It's really good fun and I would heartily recommend that. As for the book, this really is, it's an encyclopedia of folklore. There's all kinds of things, just flicked open a book at random, chapter 9 there. It's called Witches, the Cunning Folk and Alchemy, so you've got a whole chapter on magic and witchcraft and that kind of thing. Chapter 12 I've just seen, Love and Marriage. So lots of folklore there as well. I often use this book for writing short stories because, I mean, this stuff has been around for hundreds, maybe even thousands of years. It's all public domain. There's some really great ideas in here. It's a lot of it, well, all of it British. So definitely I would recommend this. Very, very good. Okay, my next book, staying with the folk theme, this book, which is called We Don't Go Back, A Watcher's Guide to Folklore. This was a Kickstarter. I love doing Kickstarters, I can't stop doing them. My wife probably wants me to stop because, well, yeah, we're getting full of board games and books and stuff. But this is by Howard David Ingham and he ran this on Kickstarter about a year ago and they've just arrived in the last month or so. What he does here, this is not an encyclopedia, so if you're looking to find lots of facts behind the scenes, things like that out, then this is maybe not the book for you. But if you want lots and lots of film reviews, of folklore style films, things like The Wicker Man, The Witch, I've just seen in here as well, The Stone Tape, which is a really great BBC play from the 70s. If you can watch that, that is just fantastic. What else have we got? The 1970 take on the Lovecraft story, The Dunwich Horror. M. Night Shyamalan's The Village. So Howard goes through all these films. So there are some behind the scenes stories and some interesting facts, but this is very much a book of essays. What he likes about those films, what he doesn't like about those films, how they fit in with folklore, how they fit in with landscape, and he's just a really nice guy and his opinions on these films I really trust. I mean, he wrote, in fact I've just opened it by complete chance on the page now, a Czechoslovakian film called, you can't see that, it's not focusing, never mind, Valerie and Her Week of Wonders. As I said, this is a Czechoslovakian film, it's more of a fairy tale, a dark fairy tale than a horror film, but he recommended it to me last year when I was doing our 31 Days of Horror, and I just loved it. It's great, it's got folklore, it's got vampires, it's got some really great scenery, it's a really nice story, it's just a great film and I would have never found it if it hadn't been for Howard, so that is also a very good one. We Don't Go Back, A Watcher's Guide to Folklore by Howard David Ingham. Next up, something completely different. Now, you may have read Grady Hendrix's novels, My Best Friend's Exorcism. I read that earlier this year. I really enjoyed that. It's got a really strong retro 80s feel about it. It really spoke to me because that's when I grew up, so he's a great writer. He does lots of fiction, Horror Store is another one, which is like a haunted furniture store like IKEA. I've just started reading that, I'm really enjoying it. However, he does have a non-fiction book, and this is called Paperbacks from Hell. Now this, it basically tells you to ignore that idiom that don't judge a book by its cover. And we look at just several horror books from the 70s and 80s that have really striking covers. It goes into depth about the content as well, but the covers are the star here. And for example, I just flicked it open on Peter Benchley's Jaws. Let's have another look. Let's find another good one. There's all kinds in here. There's books you've heard of, books you've not heard of. Just some fantastic covers. And they're all separated into kind of chapters together. You've got one on spooky children, so there's the Omen. Let's see, what else have we got? Lots of books with pumpkins and skeletons on the front. Looks a bit like Patrick back there. And I just love this book. It's a visual feast, but it's not just a picture book. As you can see, there is a lot of text. Grady goes into a lot of detail about what's in these books. You know, it dispels the myth that pulp horror books of the 70s and 80s were, you know, for the top shelf and airports only. I mean, there are some serious themes in these books. He picks up on them. Some of them are just a lot of fun. Some of them you just wouldn't realise what they're about without reading it. Certainly not from the cover, but as I said, the covers are the star. So if you like schlocky 70s and 80s horror novels with really scary covers and just some fun stories inside, then Paperbacks from Hell, that is the book for you. Okay, moving on. Now, I've had this one in my possession for quite some time. This is 800 Years of Haunted Liverpool by John Reppion. Now, there are a few authors who write ghost stories about Liverpool. There's Tom Slemon. There's somebody else, I can't remember their name, I'm really sorry. But John Reppion did this book as part of a haunted series. I've also got Haunted Devon by Ian Addicote. And what I like about this is, while Tom Slemon does tell a good story, there is sometimes questions raised about the authenticity of them. However, this one, it just goes into lots of history about places that I love, because I worked in Liverpool for over 10 years, I lived near Liverpool for over 20 years, so I'm very attached to the place. I really love it. I'm sorry to say, Liverpool people, that I now live in Manchester, but I still love the place and I need to get back there as soon as possible. But it's got some great photos of locations that you might recognise. Let's see if I can find one. Okay, here we go. This is a good example. That is the pyramid of William Mackenzie. It's a tomb. It's on, I think it's on Hope Street in Liverpool. Is it Rodney Street? Anyway, the story's here. This is a well-known myth in Liverpool that William Mackenzie, shipping or a railway magnate, some kind of magnate anyway, he had lots of money, he was an engineer, and he didn't want to lose that. He made a pact with the devil to keep that money, and the devil challenged him to a game of cards. If Mackenzie won, he got the money, and he just got to take the money and run, basically. If the devil won, Mackenzie still got the money, but the soul belonged to the devil. As you probably know in these stories, it didn't go Mackenzie's way, and he lost the game. Silly man. Anyway, he had his fame and his fortune and his big empire building, I think it was railways, I'm going to have to look that one up. And then as he was growing older, he realised that his time was coming to an end, the devil would claim his soul, and so buried in this pyramid, there it is again, which I've driven past and seen many times. It's a creepy looking place. But yeah, the legend says that he's buried sitting upright in there at a card table with a deck of cards on the table and a hand in his bony clutches, holding the hand that would have won the game. Some people believe that's true, some people say it's not. It's a great story anyway. And this book is full of history all around Liverpool. I've got places like Speke Hall there, which I believe has many hauntings. Spring-Heeled Jack, a famous Victorian character who was a bit of a supernatural Jack the Ripper character. If you don't know him, well worth looking up. He's linked to Liverpool and London. There's even, I think I saw it earlier when I was looking through this, getting ready. Ah yeah, okay, there's the Royal Liver building there, famous for being from Liverpool, famous for the credits of the Liver birds, famous for having the two birds on the top. I worked there for 8 years, I loved the place. Didn't see a ghost, but yeah, there are some good stories about all places like that. So that is Haunted Liverpool, 800 Years of Haunted Liverpool by John Reppion. I'll be coming back to him in a bit. Okay, what have we got next? Oh, this is a big heavy one. This is a new one. My wife bought me this. This is a Taschen guide. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with Taschen. They do these big, thick, encyclopedic books that basically you can get them on anything. You can get them on art, you can get them on cars, you can get them on motorbikes. And this one is horror cinema. The best scary movie of all times. And it's edited by Paul Duncan and Jürgen Müller. Now this is just a great reference guide for every kind of scary film you can think of. I mean, you've got their top 50 favourite films in one chapter. I'm just looking through this. These are in date order. We've got Haxan, Witchcraft Through the Ages, a classic. Nosferatu. Dracula, Todd Browning's Dracula. The Wolfman, Cat People. Night of the Living Dead, Rosemary's Baby. This goes all the way from the start of horror cinema all the way up to the modern day. We've got The Fly, Near Dark. The Others is the most modern one in their list there, so I guess this book is a little out of date, but I only bought it recently, so who knows. But there's a chapter on zombies and the living dead. It's got a nice picture of, you might recognise there, Frankenstein with the little girl. And this one, unlike Howard's book, this does have lots of behind the scenes information, stories about the director, stories about the actors. It gives you an overview of the plot. There's some great screenshots from the picture. Just at random, I flicked it open and it's on a page talking about Haxan, which I mentioned before. Really weird but very cool film if you get the chance. We've got some stories about Don't Look Now here and Nicholas Roeg. They're going on to talk about Walkabout, his other film that is often in the folk horror genre. And this is just a really good book with hundreds of pages of films, information about them, behind the scenes, in front of the camera, plot, cast lists, everything. If this a classic horror film that you want to find something out about, this is definitely the book to get. Taschen's Horror Cinema. Okay. Something different again now. Now, I got this book at the Hepworth Gallery in Bradford. Now, I don't for the life of me know what the exhibition was that this went with, because I went to see just the modern art there, just an ordinary day. However, this was on the shelf in the gift store by the exit, and it's called Zombies, an illustrated history of the undead by Jovanka Vukovic, with a foreword by somebody that any zombie fan will instantly recognise, George A. Romero. Now, I've read this through a couple of times. It's very much a chronological order of zombies in cinema. It goes all the way back to the origins of where the zombie myth comes from. We've got photographs from New Orleans and from Haiti and all those voodoo places that are linked with the zombie mythology. There's some really nice artwork in there, you can see that. And then we move on when zombie stories started to appear in magazines like Weird Tales, Strange Tales, the kind of places that Lovecraft would try to sell his wares. And then we move into cinema. Got some really old films, some classics in here that you may not have heard of, going all the way back to the 30s and 40s. We've got a few here. King of the Zombies. Bela Lugosi in Bowery at Midnight. I don't know that one, I'll have to check that. Voodoo Man, once again starring Bela Lugosi. You like the old zombies. Zombies on Broadway. And it goes through the 40s and 50s onto the 70s, which is, for me, the classic zombie period. We've got a good few pages on Dawn of the Dead, Night of the Living Dead, and a film that, as a kid, scared the living daylights out of me. Lucio Fulci's Zombie 2, or Zombie Flesh Eaters, or it depends which country you're in. In the UK it's Zombie Flesh Eaters. A film I love, a film that scared me silly. I was just a small kid. I was having the day off work. My mum took me to a video shop to get something out. Now I remember, I don't know how I remember because we're talking about 1983 here, I asked her to hire out for me Battlestar Galactica, the film that they made out of the first 2 or 3 episodes. And you had to go through the horror section to get to the children's section. I'm not sure whose idea that was. But there was a poster in there for Zombie Flesh Eaters, and it was just like a hand reaching out of the ground. And yeah, that pretty much scarred me for a long time. And later that day, we went to pick my brother up from school. My mum parked by the woods and said, "You wait there, I'll go and get him." And yeah, I just sat there staring in terror into the woods, thinking there were A, zombies, and B, cannibals, because I'd also seen the poster for Cannibal Holocaust that day. And yeah, I sat there for 5-10 minutes while Mum went to get my brother, just in absolute terror, thinking that zombies and cannibals were going to team up and come out of the woods and get me. So I'm not quite sure why I'm reading this again, because zombie films and volcano films gave me nightmares when I was a kid. I watched Volcano again in 1997 with Tommy Lee Jones, and the nightmares started, so I don't know. I just really like it. I haven't had zombie nightmares. Well, not many. Anyway, moving on. Something quite different again. This book here, which is called Scarred for Life, Volume 1, the 1970s. Now this is a great book. It is by Stephen Brotherstone and Dave Lawrence. You'll be able to get this in all the usual places. I bought it from the author's self-publishing page, which I will put a link to in the article linked to this video. Basically, they wrote this book after a discussion at work where people were talking about stuff that used to be on TV in the 70s when they were kids, in the 80s when they were kids. That was really quite terrifying and disturbing, and they were scarred for life, which is often a phrase you hear being bandied about when people talk about things like old episodes of Doctor Who, public information films and whatnot. And somebody said, you know so much about all this, why don't you put it in a book? And they said, oh, don't be silly, we could never write a book. And as you can see, when they did start to write it, it's a very small text, and there are over 700 pages of all kinds of stuff to do with growing up in the 70s. Now the 80s version isn't out yet. That volume will be out, I believe, later this year, in time for Christmas. But they've got sections on, let's see, 2000 AD, yep, scary comic. The fact that there was a lot of paranormal interest in TV, on the news in the 70s, they have a chapter on that. UFOs, once again, very popular in the 70s. Let's see what else we've got. Films, lots of scary films. We've already talked about the zombie films of the 70s. They mentioned Watership Down, possibly scarier than the zombies, those rabbits. Folk horror, which pretty much found its footing in the 70s after starting in the 60s. Let's see what else have we got. The Jaws board game they talk about, and I Want to Bite Your Finger. That was a cool board game that I always wanted as a kid, never got it. I may have to look on eBay for that. I Want to Bite Your Finger. Yeah, okay. The Handbook of Horror Stories. Yeah, I've got a few of those. They're good. They're scary. I had some as a kid. They were scary. Blake 7 is mentioned in here. Now, one of our team, Claire, wrote a piece a few weeks ago about the scary stuff in Blake 7. I would urge you to check that out. If I remember, I'll try and put a link in the article as well. The Stone Tape that I mentioned before. Public information films, Doctor Who, all kinds of stuff. Just if you love nostalgia, if you love the 70s, Scarred for Life, Stephen Brotherstone and Dave Lawrence. And watch out for the 80s edition coming out later this year. Okay, now we're getting to the bottom of the pile now. But this book here, this is quite different. All those other books have an element of fun about them. This one's a lot more serious. Now, it is fun as well, but this one is called The Doomsday Handbook, 50 Ways the World Could End. My wife bought this for me in the Natural History Museum shop in London quite a few years ago now. And in this book we have 50 scenarios that could end the world. Obviously this is a science book, and they all go into like the proper scientific reasons why this could happen. It is quite scary, which is why I've included it. So we've got all kinds of stuff here. For example, I flicked it open on a page. The Gulf Stream shuts down. That would cause all kinds of terrible weather. We saw that in The Day After Tomorrow, the film with Dennis Quaid and Jake Gyllenhaal. What else have we got? Global food crisis. Once again, another horror film, Soylent Green. So these are real concerns that have entertained us, but they've predicted that this could happen. Another one, invasive species, insects. They just get everywhere. We saw them on Doctor Who the other night. Spiders taking over a hotel when they shouldn't be. What else have we got? Artificial superintelligence. We've got self-driving cars coming. We've got refrigerators that will order you milk when it knows you've run out. Who knows where that will stop? And this book, the Doomsday Handbook, goes into all kinds of scientific detail about 50 of those scenarios. I was disappointed because I thought it would be fun. I was disappointed there wasn't a sort of a rapture, Jesus comes back kind of chapter. But as I said, it's a very serious scientific book as well as a fun, scary read. So yeah, it probably doesn't belong here. Although they do have a chapter on hostile extraterrestrials. So who knows? Who knows? Anyway. Yeah, check that out for a serious, and I mean serious, like proper scientific book, but very good fun. Now this is the biggest one on my pile. I just love this book because I love the film that is on the front. Now this is Monsters in the Movies by a name you might recognise there, John Landis, the film director who made American Werewolf in London, Innocent Blood, the vampire film with Anne Parlow, the Blues Brothers, and so many other great films. Now you may be aware, he was asked by Michael Jackson after making American Werewolf to turn Michael Jackson into a werewolf for the Thriller video. And he just loves Hollywood monsters. Now that shines through in this book. This is very much a coffee table book. It's actually hurting my arms holding it up. But it's got chapters on all the classic monsters. So we have got Ghosts, where he looks at, let's see, oh of course we've got The Shining there, we've got The Orphanage, The Uninvited, I watched that a few weeks ago, really enjoyed it, 1944 I think it is, Ghost Story, yes, 1944, Shining I've got coming up on Halloween night, and as you can see, lots of pictures with captions. It's not as wordy a book as some of the other picture books. There are pages with more text on, with lots of information. This is a chapter on dragons and dinosaurs. So hopefully if I flip through this we'll find The Day the Earth Stood Still. One of my favourite films as a kid. King Kong there. Oh, the dragon out of Sleeping Beauty, quite scary that one. Oh, the dragon out of Dragon Slayer. If you haven't seen Dragon Slayer, check it out, right? It's 80s Disney. Live action film. It's got Peter MacNicol in, who you recognise from Ghostbusters 2, Ally McBeal, and the dragon is stop motion. Vermithrax Pejorative is his name, and it is just some of the best stop motion I've ever seen. It's superb, and it's quite a dark film considering it's Disney. It's got some really bad things happen, but it's also fun. Sword and sorcery. There were a lot of those films around in the 80s, so check it out. Yeah, so we've got CGI. as well. So this comes fairly up to the modern day. I've had it 3 or 4 years now. It's just a great book to have on your coffee table and pick up and flick through, and of course it's got loads of Harryhausen in there. There's the Kraken from Clash of the Titans. There's the Leprechaun, which of course they included in Wayne's World. Quite a funny joke there, I'm the Leprechaun. Okay, so John Landis. Monsters in the movies. Really good fun. One to just have out on the table when your friends come round and just look at the pictures. It's a fab book, very heavy, but I love it. Now, I've got one more. I've saved this one till last deliberately because this book, which is The Frighteners by Peter Laws. Let me just get that focused, there we go. Frighteners by Peter Laws. This is very much more a prose book, as you can see. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with Peter Laws. He is a journalist, a YouTuber. He's also a musician, and he's a novelist, and also he writes non-fiction books. And on top of all that, he is also a Baptist minister. I think it was in the 90s he became a Christian and moved away from horror films, and then by chance happened to see The Exorcist and realised that you could be a Christian and enjoy horror films because some of the messages were the same. And since then he started to write about horror. He started to write about religion and horror, just horror. I mean, his novels are about an atheist who solves religiously motivated crimes. Check those out as well, Purged and Unleashed. They're really, really good. But yeah, The Frighteners, coming back to the book I actually want to talk about, it's called Why We Love Monsters, Ghosts, Death and Gore. And he looks into it in quite detailed depth here, what it is about the human psyche that just loves to be frightened. He talks about horror films, horror novels, you know, situations in which we find ourselves scared, like haunted houses, ghost trains, that kind of thing. He goes all over the country talking to people. He goes to look for a werewolf in Lincolnshire. He goes to a furry convention to see if he can get in the mindset of why people would like to be animals, in the chapter where he talks about werewolves. He even goes to Transylvania to go on a tour of Dracula's castle and just visit all the Dracula landmarks. And it's a really well thought out book that puts across some theories that I've agreed with for a while, but it's just nice to see them on paper about why we love being scared. I won't give you all the answers because I think you should buy it and read it. Now, I said he's a Baptist minister. You don't need to worry. He doesn't preach. He doesn't say you shouldn't be watching horror. It's just a really, really nice book, which is a lot of fun. There's lots of anecdotes, some really funny stories, some scary stories, and he's a really nice guy. And yeah, this is now out on paperbacks. It's my hardback copy I bought a few months ago, but it's now out on paperback just a few weeks ago, so definitely you should get that. Okay, so as promised, I said I'd come back to John Reppion. Now this is a book I reviewed last week. It's a graphic novel. It's got some fantastic illustration. It's suitable for all ages. It says on the back juvenile fiction, but I mean, I read this and I enjoyed it. It's a story about a teenage girl who inherits something unusual which gives her abilities that she didn't have before. And she discovers that other people have these abilities, but can she meet them before somebody else steals all their powers? It's very much a superhero story. It's very British. It's really good. Now, why are you reading out stuff about a fiction book, a graphic novel, I hear you ask? Well, we have got a signed copy of this by John Reppion, his wife Leah Moore. The two of those wrote the story, and also Sally Jane Thompson, who is the illustrator, has done as a special little bookplate to put inside with a personalised illustration and a signature. We've got one of those to give away, so look at the links below to find out how you can win a copy of that Conspiracy of Ravens by Leah Moore, John Reppion and Sally Jane Thompson. It's a great book, it's lovely to look at, kids will love it, adults will enjoy it. It's got a real sense of adventure and fun. It's a little bit scary, it's a little bit exciting, it's a little bit high school. It's got a John Hughes kind of thing, maybe Mean Girls. So yeah, it's got a bit of everything. Very good, and check the links below for how to win a copy. Right, well that's it for now. Thank you for listening, thank you for putting up with me. This has been my first ever video, so I hope I've done okay. Have you got a favourite non-fiction horror book that you love? Let us know in the comments below. And if you've got any questions about any of the books, let us know. Otherwise, thank you for watching our video. Please keep coming back to World Geekly News, where I'm sure I've got a bit more practice, and I will be back with another video, hopefully doing some of my favourite fiction horror novels. Okay, well, thank you very much.